Welcome to the Monday, June 23rd, 2014 Washougal City Council Workshop. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker. Councilmember McDaniel.
Councilmembers Shoemaker and McDaniel let us know that they would not be in attendance this evening. Our first order of business this evening is public comments. I think what I would like to do, since it looks like we've probably got some folks here for the annexation discussions, if there are any folks who have items that they would like to bring up to council other than the annexation, let's have you do those now. If you've got some that have to do with the annexations, we'll take those during the portion of the meeting when we're actually discussing the annexations themselves. So, are there any members of the public that would like to comment to council on anything other than an annexation? Okay, diving right in then. Mitch, annexations.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. So this is our second discussion. You recall I was here in April to present the initial petitions that we had. We had 6 separate petitions for annexation that were filed. They are all within the northwest corner of our urban growth boundary. Encompass 3 different zoning designations in that area and 150 acres total in those petitions. A little bit more on the background. RCW 35A14 is the annexation section in state law. Several different ways for annexation, but what the city utilizes is the direct petition method. Direct petition method, also known as the 60% petition method, is the first step in that is to file an intent to commence annexation. That is the 6 that we have already that have been filed with us, and they're filed by owners of property representing not less than 10% of the assessed value of the property for which annexation is sought. So when they go to file a petition for annexation, that 60% will come into play then. That'll have to be 60% of the assessed value, or property owners representing 60% of the assessed value of the property for which annexation is sought. So again, graphically moving in here, we have our city boundaries. Again, we're going to be looking at the northwest portion of the city and zooming in even more. And so this is the area that has been requested by petition to come in. I went over the individual petitions the last time. I won't spend a lot of time, but real quick. The first one is the McKeever annexation, approximately 20 acres. Next is the Gast annexation, 5 acres. Moving across, the Stryker property, again another 5 acres. Cheney, 5 acres. DeBoover, 100 acres there. And again, you recall the zoning is split there. I'm not sure if I can, how I go about this in the new system. The Zimmer property is the last one there.
So that's how many petitions total?
That's 6 petitions total for all of that. If you remember that the zoning boundary runs right through here, actually dips down right there. But everything north is employment and everything south is residential. So that's what we're dealing with. Those are the properties that have filed the petition, intent to petition for annexation.
Mitch, remind us what the third zoning designation is?
There's R175, residential, R110, residential, and then employment center.
Yeah.
So RCW 35A14-120 is the specific action that council has to take. You, council, will need to either accept those petitions for annexation, reject them, or geographically modify that boundary. It also requires that you assign the assumption of any portion of existing city indebtedness by that area to be annexed. So if there's any city debt that we would have that we would put out to those properties, you need to make that action as well. I've had a conversation with the finance director. We don't have anything in that area that we would be assigning to that area for annexation for indebtedness. But that's so that accepting, rejecting, or geographically modifying is the action that you will have to take, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So at our April meeting, I presented this boundary. At that time, the mayor asked me to reach out to property owners around. I sent letters to surrounding properties asking about what their interest was in annexation. As we waited for those to come back in, I looked at how we would possibly geographically modify that boundary. Option one, and these are not in any specific order, but option one, it takes in 14 additional properties and about approximately 42 acres within that option. Option two, we just lose the kind of that on that east side, or west side, excuse me, 4 properties there. It's 10 parcels total, about 36 acres, additional acres that would come in.
What kind of zoning?
That's all residential.
Okay.
Everything down there is residential. Again, only that north half of that large parcel and everything there is employment. Option three, a little more aggressive with the exception of those 4 over in this area here. We saw as it was coming back, the first person to reach out was this gentleman here, and who informed me that everybody in here would be opposed. They're very high value properties with improvements, and since that time I've met with another gentleman in there who also was opposed to it. So in looking at if we possibly took those out, would we be able to get a larger portion of property? We did this. This is 17 additional parcels that would come in with that, and that only got us, or it would be 83 acres, additional acres, sorry, 17 parcels and 83 additional acres.
Those residences have Washougal or Camas addresses.
Some along Crown have Camas addresses, quite a lot of them. So then I got like I said, I got letters back or had conversations with property owners surrounding the area. This map represents the feedback that I got. Again, the green is those people that filed the petition, and then red around that, those are people that are opposed to being annexed into the city. The yellow, they are in favor of annexing, although they didn't file a petition, but if one was circulated, they would, at least they had indicated that they would sign. And then the blue was no response. I didn't hear back from those parties. So in looking at putting that input in with the options that I discussed earlier, option one, you've got 5 parcels there that would not want to annex into the city, and then several more that did not respond. Based on that percentage, if we only had those in green and yellow, you would only be at 53.5%. So that annexation would be less than the 60%.
Question.
Yes.
The parcels on the southeast corner, one is blue and one is
Yep.
red.
Two are red. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't see the line in there. The parcels to the east, that's not in the city, right?
No, that's still in an urban
So
growth.
we wouldn't be creating an island.
Right.
Okay.
Nope.
One of those
That
blues
it?
that you were talking about, we'll go with that. It's red, or red.
The option 2, looking at option 2, again, that was the 10 acres, or excuse me, 10 parcels. There's 3 parcels there. That's its that percentage. If we looked at that boundary, that's at 68.41%. So above that 60%. So you possibly could look at modifying the boundary to go.
Can you show number 1 again? Oh, that helps. Okay. And number 2. Changing the boundaries. I see what he's doing.
Yeah, just looking at modify. And then again, option 3, looking at that, that's only at 57.1%. So again, below that 60% threshold there. So in all of these options, and again, these are just, options that staff looked at. Council could look at modifying the boundary, and staff would seek direction how we would seek to modify that boundary. But at least there's one option in front of you that you possibly could move forward with an annexation petition, and when you take action, that you can make a recommendation on. So looking at next steps, the meeting is set to meet with the petitioners on July 14th. That is when you will take your action, whether to accept, reject, or geographically modify that boundary. Also at that time, I'm putting forward a resolution to rescind the resolution that I talked about last time, the 936. It's just kind of wrong and violates state law, so I want to get rid of that one.
Let's
So.
do that,
What was that, when was that resolution adopted?
It was back when it was updated when they did away with the boundary review board.
Okay. Okay.
But it was, prior to that was really when it
Betty
was.
Sue Morris was still around when that happened, so.
Wow.
Staff will work with petitioners then, based on your guys' recommendation at the July 14th, and work with them about moving forward their petition for annexation. Staff will also, if you recall, need to develop those regulations for employment center, which needs to be done prior to annexation. So we will we will run those through Planning Commission and bring those back to you for adoption prior to annexation occurring. And then we would be back later in the year with a hearing on the actual annexation. So that's it, and as Sean mentioned, several members of the public, and I just put this one up. I'm happy to go back to any map that you want me to.
So Mitch, really the three options are either to reject the entire thing, or to take just the petitioners, or your option 2.
On that, I mean, I think that if you looked
If we
at.
modify it.
Yeah, if you can modify it. I have some spreadsheets that I could start, clicking off boxes and see what percentage we ended up with. So if there's some other option that council wanted to look at, I would be able to go back and just, change those no's to yeses or yeses to no's, and just look at those percentages and see what we would come up with. It's important to note in the extreme northeast corner, there's 2 parcels, those blue parcels. Those are Clark Public Utility parcels. I did hear from them initially. They were just concerned, or wanted to know what parcels really they were looking at.
Which parcel are we talking about?
The northeast.
Okay.
2 tiny
The
blue ones
two
up
up in
there.
the northeast corner.
They've got a substation out there.
Yeah, and, but I never did hear back.
Tax exempt property, right?
Yeah, one way or the other. But there is value associated with it, so. But not enough that would move the needle one way or the other.
Is that where the substation is?
As a preliminary matter, just before I hear any from the public, I would only be inclined to, if we're going to expand it at all, and I'm not sure we should at all, I'd only look at the Clark PUD substation properties we were just talking about, just because a nice square boundary looks a little better. And then maybe that parcel on the southwest that seems to be more or less almost nearly surrounded by the annexation area. Other than that, I wouldn't expand it.
Council questions?
Brent, would you repeat what you just said about the one on the bottom left?
So he's looking at this one, he would say
Yes.
that he would
We
take,
didn't hear from them.
And what about
No.
You
these
would-
two?
What did you want to do? What
I
did you say?
would consider expanding the annexation to those two, just to make the boundaries make more sense.
and it wouldn't, he would not include these.
I would not include
Those
Right.
are adjacent to the city right there, though, aren't they?
On the south.
Yes.
They're not on the east. They don't share a boundary with us on the east. They're
This
still
is
part of our
county,
urban growth
right.
Still
boundary.
county here.
This is still county, okay.
Now, there
Right,
is,
so they're doing island.
one thing to add real quick, though, to your thoughts, Brent, and one thing that doesn't show on here, there is a roadway that runs along there that accesses those. That, if you choose to take these and not the 3 on the other side, you're now gonna have addresses on one side of that street that are gonna be.
3 on the other side. Which 3 are we talking about on the other
Are you
side?
talking
2
this
red,
here?
1 blue.
Correct,
Oh, those.
those ones right there.
Okay.
The roadway runs between them coming up through there.
To the east of that property?
Nope, to the west.
Right here.
Okay,
Okay.
I see. And then what, you were saying properties would, addresses would what?
You're then gonna have areas over here that are gonna develop, that are gonna be inside the city. These ones out here that are on the same street, that are gonna be islands, to some degree. You can't access from this
Yeah,
Yeah, I
direction.
think the road is more right here, though. I think it,
No,
No.
is it here?
Yep.
it's right on the black line.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was over
Well, I think
here.
we have some people here
Yeah, there's
from that
probably,
area, so I'd like to hear from them.
Yeah, I want, before we start with public, I want to make sure that council gets their initial questions done so that you understand what all these parcels are that people are going to start talking about, so.
could I just make one other note, is that staff has met along with Rob Charles, the public works engineer, city engineer, excuse me, that with several of the other property owners, particularly in the northwest portion, those conversations really hovered around utilities and our ability to serve out there. Rob brought our capital facility plans for both water and sewer to show us, so if there was any questions that came up about utilities within that area. We did plan for this area. There are capital facility plans in place that would provide for this area, and city engineer Rob Charles is here if you had any questions related to the utilities on that side as well.
That's exactly my question.
Paul, go ahead.
There was a discussion when this first came up about access for water and wastewater lines being a bit tortured unless some of the properties came into the annexation. Can you expand on that at all?
We've never had any discussions along those lines.
I thought
Water you have easy access for, correct?
there was there's a reservoir that's planned for up there, correct?
In the future, yes.
In the future, yes. And I thought that access to that reservoir was really through the corner of a property unless you got,
It's an expansion of the existing Woodburn Hill Reservoir. There'd be another reservoir placed at that site in the
right,
future.
but access to it and the lines to that reservoir.
We'll only run to the east and not to the west.
I thought they ran north.
They do run north.
Where?
313th Avenue, it looks like the plan is showing. I mean, these are approximate.
Right.
Always, so the main line comes out 313th Avenue.
But I thought there was an expansion that was necessary over here. No?
For reservoirs?
For water lines and reservoirs, yeah.
Well, we're building the new reservoir.
Right.
In the existing city limits, and that'll serve part of this. But at some point, we'll need future capacity with another reservoir in the 20-year horizon.
Right. But you're not worried about access here at all?
Building the water lines?
Right.
Well, yes.
That'll
I mean, that
occur
would be- that would
time
be
of development.
Development,
Yeah.
yeah. We wouldn't want to put a bunch of water lines where we don't know roads are going to be.
But I thought there was a place where you had a property line that looked like that and another one that looked like that, and you were gonna have to push a water line right through that corner.
That's
Maybe
not
not.
ringing a bell with me.
Okay, all right.
Suffice it to say, in water, all of this area that we're talking about right now, not any additional, everything that we're talking about now, we can service from existing systems.
Well, in the future, we would have to build a second reservoir.
Right.
But yes, we've planned for it. Yes,
Are we talking about the green area or the entire area?
the entire area.
Okay.
And then my other comment is, I'm back to the thing that I mentioned over and over again, that a single-family residence costs $1.25 in services for every dollar in revenue it provides, roughly speaking, statewide. So you cannot build houses long-term and use that as a way of building your way out of a financial problem. What you really need is retail. Retail costs about 65 cents per dollar of services. I mean per dollar of revenue. And so to me, it's critically important that the employment zone be included. And I don't want an unbalanced annexation in favor of residential.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the DeBoever property in and of itself, you know, all north, the north portion, north half of it is the employment center portion of it. Now, I mean, you know, they're here, they can talk about, you know, if they have any intent or plans for that. I don't think that they do. I think that they're looking more service oriented in that. But you are aware that there is development in the pipeline very soon that wants to move in this area, the McKeever portion, and they want to go forward. Again, that's still
Right.
residential.
Right.
But, you know, we looked at how could we bring all that employment center in, and we just, you know, given the public's willingness to annex, or at least their intent to annex right now, the percentage isn't there for that to occur. But again, it's trying to draw those lines.
Nor are we proposing that you change any of the zoning up there and
Yeah,
convert
no,
any
not
employment
proposing.
center
Right.
to residential.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Where does the employment center zone run, roughly?
Again, right through here,
Okay.
right like that.
And the people on in the western part of that area, northwestern part of the map, in the red area,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to come in for what reason as an employment center? Because it would seem that
No,
can't-
that's really where the issue at, no, we haven't had any discussion around that. That may
They're-
be a discussion.
they are opposed, though.
They are opposed, but what the discussions have been around are utilities. They had requests to actually hook into Camas utilities. We've met with them on 2 occasions and said that, you know, this is within the city's urban growth boundary. We have a plan to serve, and it is our intent to serve. We've met with Camas. Camas is not interested in taking this area.
Well, under the GMA, before they can develop, they have to be in the city, don't they?
To develop, you bet, absolutely.
So they have to
At an
be-
urban level, you bet.
Yeah, so, you know, it seems to me it would be in their interest to get annexed.
At some point, I think, you know, I don't want to speak for them, but their concern is around the utility, and honestly, it's sewer, it's the substation, or pump station, excuse me. You know, and the cost of that, and that this area, when they develop, or whoever develops, the cost associated with that. What we've talked about at a staff level is, it's in their plan, but we talked about pushing it up on the CIP, and so it would be, you know, they could get credit for doing those improvements as well. But I think that that's really what their concern is hovering around, is that the cost for that improvement.
Theoretically, if they could hook into Camas, would it be less for them to do that?
Well, they wouldn't have the infrastructure to put in, but Camas has said they have their own issues with the North Shore, and all of the North Shore of Camas comes this way down to Crown and down, and they do not have capacity issues they have capacity issues, excuse me.
So Camas can't serve them at this point.
At this point, and they don't want to. They didn't do an analysis of this.
It's a non-starter for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Potential.
You mentioned the ones on the east side would be an island. I don't foresee a problem if they are an island.
It would, for emergency services, it would be very weird for emergency personnel to have to pass through the city to get to a county address. Keep in mind that these other areas on the other side, you see them nicely drawn in, none of them have access over to these. The only way to access those is to come through the city to get to the county. That's why I said, in essence, they're an island.
I lived in California where they were literally,
All over the place, I know.
they're
what you mean.
literally my block
Yeah.
in the city of Anaheim. And 3 blocks away, there's another block. And so I'm just saying, I never experienced personally a problem, so I'm just wondering what that problem is. Is there a way to have, if that became an island, is there a way for them to be serviced by the city, emergency services?
What will end up happening, and
That's a negatory. Huh?
well, what will end up happening, quite frankly, and we would push the issue to make sure that they do it, the dispatch center would dispatch both the county and the city.
How'd we do it in California?
Well, California, you take chances. Up here, we just as soon not, so we are going to send units that are going to respond.
No, I'm
and
just
figure it out
assuming
once
that
they
there
get
was
there.
some sort of agreement. I know they wouldn't just
Well,
chance.
there
that-
might be, and I mean, maybe we could.
They didn't
reach
just
some kind of
chance that
agreement
somebody
prior
would
to
show
the-
up on my block.
You could reach-
In a perfect world, if the dispatch center always works correctly and somebody gives a correct address, it'll tell them which jurisdiction to dispatch.
Sure.
When you're this close, we're not gonna ask them to take any chances. We're gonna send fire rigs, we're gonna send police rigs, county's gonna send fire, county's gonna send deputies.
And
Once everybody gets there and figures it out, people can leave, but you've got more vehicles than you need running code potentially to calls.
Okay.
Again,
And-
it's only one roadway, and it's a dead end.
And there was a historical problem that I think only Mitch and I were here for, in which, as you know, East County Fire and Rescue has a station down on 39th at Evergreen. And they were dispatching to Washougal addresses and charging the city for making those calls. And so the thing that makes it weird is, how do you charge, who has to pay for those calls? Is it the county? Is it the city? And they'll bill each other and argue about it, is what happened with ECFR. And so
I don't believe, Scott, we didn't ever pay any of those bills, did we? I've heard stories that we got invoiced, but I haven't heard any stories that we actually paid any.
The only time there has ever been any discussion about billing for services in the past was when East County voters voted down the EMS levy. And so.
For EMS calls.
Camus increased their ambulance charges, and we instituted an EMS response because we had no revenue to respond to 80% of our calls. So there has never been a discussion about charging for response, except for EMS, when the EMS levy failed. And those bills went to the customers.
Thank you.
Other questions? Do we understand clearly what it is? We're at least as clear as we
Clear
can
as
for the moment.
I'd kind of like to have a staff recommendation at some point on this, too.
My recommendation would be option 2 in looking at that.
Show that to me again, please.
So everything inside the block.
So we're bringing in
3 parcels that at
that are
least,
opposed, and maybe 4 with the,
and 4 that have not, 2, 3, 5 that have not responded, 2
Okay,
of
well,
which are.
I heard from the audience that one of the blues is going to turn to red tonight.
So-
Well, and this percentage is at 68, so depending on which it is, I mean, then it's still a fairly high percentage. But this also brings in, you recall, I'm sorry if I can get back to this.
What's the necessary percentage?
60?
Over 60.
Okay.
This parcel, they were initially, if you remember, in April, I said that they actually came to us and said they wanted to be annexed as well, but they didn't get the petition, so we included them. And since then, I've met with this party here, and they have said that they do want to come in. So it also brings in 2 other parcels of property that want to come into the city of Washougal.
What about the one to the east from there, from the,
The red.
yeah, that one?
Yeah, I spoke with him. He's here this evening, and I'm
Okay,
sure we'll hear from him.
all right.
Good, I'm glad they're here.
Okay, so, council good for the moment?
So option 2, huh?
That's staff's recommendation.
So what I'd like to do is open up for public comment, for folks that would like to comment. And Mitch, if you want to leave this map up and we can
2?
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
we can kind of work off this one for the moment. We can go to other ones if we need to, but at least at this point, we know that Mitch can highlight properties if we want to talk about individual ones, so. Those that would like to speak, if you'd like to come forward to the microphones over here on the podium and give us a name and address. I would like to ask, because we've got another discussion after this as well, if we could limit our discussions to 3 minutes or less, and I'm just gonna time on my watch, which is so exact that who cares? Who'd like to go first? Don't be shy. Good evening. Yep. Yeah, that microphone will pick everything up.
My name is Diane Richardson, and I'm at 28112 Southeast 30th Circle. This blue right here.
Blue on top of the two reds?
To the east on Crown Road. Right there, right there.
Okay.
That's ours. We are very opposed to annexing. We bought our property with a Camas address. We want a Camas address. We purposely, that's very important to us. And so we are very happy with our situation and do not want to be annexed into the city of Washougal.
Okay.
So, thank you.
And we'll point this out as we go, in case folks don't get it. Currently, yours is outside of the one that
I
we,
just wanted to make that known.
at least it's at the staff recommendation, so. John, good evening. I like your shirt. That's been my attitude all day. I just couldn't wear it.
I thought we needed something lively tonight.
There you go.
I'm the developer of Sweetbriar Estates, where the Richardsons live. I live just to the, right there.
John, could you give us your name and address so that we've got it?
John Hudson, 2911 Southeast 282nd Court, Camas.
Thank you.
Camas School District, Camas Post Office. We have a wonderful water system. That's a point that we all want. We want to keep. There's just several reasons, but that I don't know if that constitutes an island, but we are adamantly opposed to annexation, the 4 lots there.
Okay, thank you. Currently, Mitch, if you talk about those 4 lots, we've determined that that is not an island as defined by the state and the county, because
It
we
wouldn't-
don't have 80% of it
Right.
surrounded,
We
basically.
wouldn't be able to, if we drew in option 3 where we drew all the way around it, we couldn't utilize the island petition method in order to bring them in because we don't have 80% of the perimeter.
So basically, Crown Road is long enough in front of all of your properties up front Crown Road that it doesn't give us 80% of the surrounding area, which at that point, we could just take it in.
Probably gives us about 75%, doesn't it?
It's pretty darn
It's
close.
pretty close. Okay. Anyone else that would like to address council? Chief, go ahead.
Hello, Scott Kohler. I'm the fire chief, East County Fire and Rescue, 600 Northeast 267 Avenue, Camas. Mr. Mayor, going back to the discussion about charging for services, the more I thought about it, auto aid, there was no charge. The only time there was ever a charge for our EMS services was when we had no levy and when we responded to folks in our district. So I don't know what information generated that thought process, but we were really glad when we got our EMS levy back and our charge went away. In regards to the annexation, certainly the fire district understands that the city has the right to annex these properties, and especially the area in green off of 23rd up there. The way the dispatch computer works, if somebody has what's called a priority 1 or priority 2 medical call, which is life threat, or a priority 1 or priority 2 property threat where the chance of significant property loss is considered to be real by the dispatchers, the CAD sends the closest unit regardless of jurisdiction. If we have that area in green annexed by the city, will still be the primary responders to life threats and property threats off of 23rd Avenue. Currently, the CAD sends us down to the new elementary school because we are the closest responders based on time. So I guess what I'm suggesting to you is when we look at this rural area and we see very, very limited housing, we protect that area with the revenue that we get. And Mr. Greenlee, we see the exact same thing. Residential doesn't pay the full cost of 24-hour service. And so if you annex that and you put on several houses per acre, we will see the workload potentially increase for fire and EMS. And we will continue to serve that green area off of 23rd with no revenue. Currently, under the county mutual aid, auto aid arrangement, every jurisdiction responds to the closest emergency no matter what, and that is the way it should be. I guess I would just suggest that as I look at growth and I look at the potential for increasing numbers of calls, it will begin to produce costs for the East County taxpayers that are not theirs to pay. And while we do exchange some services, City of Washougal responds into our area and helps us on larger events or areas they're close to. City of Camas does the same thing. There currently is not necessarily an equal exchange of services. And so if you are considering annexation in areas where we would be first in, I guess I would just ask if at some point we could perhaps sit down with the staff and try to discuss options to mitigate costs to the East County taxpayers. And I don't know what those options might be, but we would certainly be open to talking about ways that we can make it fair to East County's taxpayers to cover areas in the city and bring that exchange of services back closer to par.
Where's your station, Chief?
The closest station we have to that is the Fern Prairie Station.
Okay,
At the airfield.
Yeah, we're staffed 24 hours a day.
thank you.
Who would like to be next?
I'll go next.
Okay. Good evening.
My name is Kathy Zimmer, 2906 Southeast 293rd Avenue. I am here representing the biggest portion of the land in this annexation between the DeBoover properties and the Zimmer properties. I am the co-trustee of all the DeBoover properties. That would be the large parcels there and in the L shape. And then the 6 smaller parcels right there are my husband and I's. And the reason this came about to begin with was we're really interested in getting annexed in because we need police protection. We've had 4 break-ins in the neighborhood in the last 2 years. One house has been broken in 3 times while it was under construction. We've had mail stolen. We've had cars dropped off, stolen cars dropped off. We've seen drug deals. I think we've seen it all in the last couple of years. A lot of it's coming from Portland with Oregon plates. So our biggest concern right now is that we want protection. We had a sign on a fence line of my family's farm right at last fall after we had put hay in the barn. And the note on the sign, the guy's mentally ill, I found out, but the note on the sign said that he wanted to watch something burn. And that really got my attention because we had probably 100 tons of hay in the barn at that time. So that's my biggest concern for being here tonight and for us putting in all of the DeBoover property. We had to put in the big piece, if you could point to that one, the biggest one, because that's one tax parcel from north to south. And so if it's by tax parcel, the whole thing had to go in. The one next to it is where the family house is, right there. And the third one is just bare land, partly under the Bonneville power lines and then over to the fence line. If I could address one other thing, you guys were talking about the blue and the pink, or red, I'm sorry, here in the corner. One of the houses that was broken into was Larry Landgraver's house. Can you point to that one, Mitch? Right there.
Right.
And the deputies were sent from the county. He was annexed into the city quite a while ago at the last annexation. The deputies were sent from the county to take his report. And he said, no, 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 I'm in the city. The city of Washougal did not know he was in the Washougal city limits. So I believe that those 3 parcels, it would be a good addition to this to make clean lines and to not leave them sitting there all by themselves with having to wait for the county to come in. When the county came, when we had that threat of that notice on the barn, the deputy told me then that sometimes at night there are only 2 deputies to cover the entire county. Sorry, I've got a sinus infection. My voice is really funny. So I'm not getting over it very fast. So anyway, you know, that was what really bothers us most. And we've had people break into our barn. My brother camped out in the barn one night and just to see what was going on, and they almost found him. They walked real close to where he was hidden. But we've had people in the barn looking to see if we had metal, I'm sure. So that's why we started this process with our properties. Questions?
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay.
Good evening.
Hello, I'm Ken Navidi. I own 2413 Southeast Crown, I believe. It's the large parcel and then the 5-acre parcel over there in the corner. I wish this showed kind of the contours, or we had like kind of a contour map, so you kind of understand. That area, that whole corner, that northwest corner is very steeply sloped, and it's sloped towards Crown Road. And looking at the sewer master plan that you guys have, it would require a pump station down at the far corner of the property. And I think in one of the plans that I saw that was written in 2006, it was something like 1.2 million for the pump station and the gravity or the pressure line. So looking at it, it looks like not more than what you would see in that northwest corner that's in pink would be allotted the cost of building that out at this point. And so it seems like a lot of cost to build a pump station. And I was the one that kind of brought up the idea of there's a sewer gravity line up Crown Road, and thus the discussion with City of Camas for potential service. I still believe in the future that it's going to, you know, you're going to get more and more property owners as you head north sharing, you know, properties between Camas and Washougal that are going to be asking the same question. It's cheaper for my water to be from Camas or my sewer to be from Washougal. Other cities prepare interlocal agreements, and so I think, you know, for that area, for it to make sense, would eventually take a interlocal agreement or something to that tune. I've asked the question, who paid for the sewer line up there, and why there wasn't a latecomers agreement on the cost, which would be assessed to all the property owners of that property. But I guess it's because we're considered Washougal, urban growth boundary, and that would be Camas on the other side. So just looking at the topography, it makes it really difficult. I question the employment rating on it. You know, I think it's right across the street from a school. It'd be great for residential. You cross the street, you're in the Lacamas Trail system. You could literally walk down to the city of Camas. It would make a really great community, very, you know, community that could enjoy the scenic area that's around it, and the fact that you got the school, kids could walk right across the street to school. So that's a big question I have. Also, another question I have as far as the police and fires, you guys we're now looking at annexing one of the farthest points of your urban growth boundary. So just beware of, if you have a police officer and he's in this far corner of your city, how long does it take for them to respond to the far east side of the city? So you kind of have an idea as far as emergency services and police and fire protection to take that into account. Thank you.
That's why thankfully we have more than 2 or 3 on patrol at all times.
Yes, yes.
Thanks, Ken.
Mitch, would you point to where the school is, the school
It's the white portion in there. I'm not sure it's on that or it's right here.
It is right on Crown Road, so it's going to be that big parcel.
Mitch, were you around when this area was designated employment center?
I was around when we changed it from heavy industrial to employment center, yes.
So it actually was heavy industrial at one time?
Yes. And actually the heavy industrial went like all the way down to here.
Do you know why they designated that part of the city for that kind of use?
I don't know the particulars behind that. I know that when we looked at employment center, it was actually during the 07 update that this portion, the county dropped this portion out of industrial.
So the county's the one that made the decision?
They made that decision, yeah, absolutely.
Seems kind of strange to put heavy industrial up there. How close is it to the nearest Camas Like Sharp and all that. That's what
Fisher's over
5
there.
miles? 5 miles, so
Yeah.
it's kind of an isolated heavy industrial
Sharp's
pocket.
at the bottom.
Yeah, and that's why when we looked at it in '05, '06, '07, we said, no, we don't want heavy industrial uses. We wanted more, high-tech, if you will, employment center.
That's strange.
Anyone else that would like to comment to council?
I just have one question. When you say employment center, are you saying like a retail place? Or are you saying like a place like Hewlett Packard or
Like
Intel?
that, yes.
So
Not
there would be 7-Elevens and that kind of stuff?
well, we haven't, it wasn't anticipated in employment center, those kind of uses were not.
So then that's kind of ruled out?
We haven't adopted employment center designations. We have to dust them off from '07, but at that time, it did not entertain those type of uses.
There might be incidental.
There may be like a 10%, depending on what size goes in, they may have a smaller portion that could be a retail portion of that as well.
Some convenience areas, that type of
Yes.
stuff. I know when the when the Shell station originally went up on top of Prune Hill, everybody just thought that was crazy. But for that, but they'll tell you that that is one of the highest grossing ones that they have, because it's the only thing up there for all those residents, for gas, for milk, for anything else. Again, that's why they call it convenience, but I'm not gonna speak for council, but I wouldn't necessarily rule something like that out in that area, given some of the densities that we've looked at of what this would have to become at that point.
But
So,
most you're saying would be 10%.
That's what it was in '07 when we talked about it. The other thing to remember is that as you move further east here, we do have commercial identified in the long-range plan as well.
anyone else that would like to address council? Good evening, Martha.
Good evening. I'm speaking to you this evening as a commissioner of East County Fire and Rescue, and I appreciate that our chief came forward and spoke earlier, so I'm not going to repeat what he said so eloquently. What it's on your radar that this is right now our area that we will have to still serve, and so I like the word mitigate. I think that's when we talk to you in the future regarding what your decision is and how we move forward, that we are considered to sit down with you and discuss how these services will be done in a fair manner for both districts, and that we can communicate about this. In reality, we know that the districts are going to change in the next 20 years, perhaps, that this isn't going to be the only thing with green and pink and blue and requests. So we appreciate that Mitch sent us the information and keeping us in the loop. Really, the communication is so important, so thank you very much for that. But it is important that we all sit down and talk about how our service is going to be done fairly, so that if our district residents are paying, and we have residentials, that's what our taxes are based on, we need to discuss that so that we have fairness in how services are done. So we really appreciate the time and listening to this. Thank you.
Yeah, your council members, just so you know as well, and not so important for members of the public, we actually take on a loss in the first year on any of these as well. The way the annexations work by state law, as soon as the annexation is approved and valid, we take over protection of the area. For 1 year from that time, all of the tax base still goes to the jurisdictions that had it previously for that transition. So while we'll have police, Camas will have fire going into those areas, we actually don't receive any of the tax base of what we would normally be getting from any other city residents for a full year. But right now, most of it's all empty properties too, as far as, not large amounts of homes up in there, so the number of calls are not going to be great.
Taxes go up, or do they go up? Do they
Pardon?
go right up? The taxes go up immediately after annexation?
But I don't believe the initial ones in the first year, because none of those are coming to the city of Washougal.
Actually, the millage rate would go down for this area. The finance director did those numbers for me, and so that would,
So it adjusts to our millage rate,
yes,
but goes to other
others,
other folks.
yeah.
So,
So a further answer to that is in year two, you would still have potentially decreased taxes under that because our millage rate is lower than what it is in the county for all of those that are stacked into there.
well, this is annexations are a common problem, or not, I shouldn't say problem, but common issue in local government. I mean, I've been through them directly in two other jurisdictions, and there's differing feelings about it from the people that are being annexed. Some of them want it, some of them don't. There's a perception that cities have higher taxes, and you just told me that their taxes are gonna go down.
The millage rate would go
So
down.
what does that mean?
That the millage rates, or what they're assessed per thousand, would go down once they annex into the city. The millage rate for this area right now is a very long number. I'll only give the first few, 0.01531. If it's annexed, our millage rate for this area would be 0.1501, so it's
So their property taxes would be lower, their bills would be lower.
lower. Now, I'm not an assessor, and I know that when the assessor looks at the property then, and that its value is based on what it could be, develop as. Right now, they're really a home's
Right,
on 5
right.
acres, so their value would
If
probably
it
change.
gets upzoned, then that would change the value, yeah, sure. Okay.
Anyone else that would like to comment? John? Uh-huh.
John Hudson. I don't fully understand that 60%. You've been talking about numbers that are just under that 60%. Is that just a guideline? Is there a set rule?
No, it's 60% that, so property owners representing 60% of the assessed value of those areas have to be in the affirmative in order for it to, the annexation to go through.
So do you have in mind adjusting those boundaries to get to that 60%?
That's what I did, and on this option two, that those percentages with even taking in everybody who said no and the ones that we did not hear from, that percentage with just everybody who's filed a petition and who said we want to come in, that's at 68%.
Okay, all right. I thought you said 58.
No, sorry. That was option three, was about 58.
This would all be a short conversation if that were true. Anyone else that would like to comment to council or ask questions? You've got us all here, well, you've got some of us all here at the moment.
I've got one more question.
Come on up.
Can we apply for farm, I forget what the terminology.
Through the assessors, agricultural?
Yes. Under city?
Yeah.
Not in the city limits, I don't think.
I believe you can. I don't believe that there's anything that's I will look into that, Ken, and Paul, but I believe that you can. I don't believe that there's any boundary. It's filed through the assessor's office, and if you meet their criteria, then you can have that
At the
deferred
same
tax.
time, look at the acreage minimums for me also.
Yeah, there's several, whether it's
Right.
farm or timber, and they're different rates.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
Good question.
I have one question.
Yes.
Kevin Richardson, 28112 Southeast 30th Circle, the blue. We own a duplex in Washougal, and the water prices are outrageous compared to the
Utility prices.
utility.
Well, water's
prices,
actually
yes.
down, so.
Oh, okay. Well, the entire package is very high compared to what we pay for water where we are, and so if we're annexed, does that go up?
What, are you on a well out there?
We're on a well right now.
It would not go up
And
until
septic?
you connect.
The PUD, I had to give the water system to PUD.
Gotcha.
privilege of that, they give me a water bill.
And where does the sewage go? Are you on septic systems?
Septics.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that none of that changes unless something fails and has to be replaced and/or rehooked to the next nearest one. But I think even with CPU, we wouldn't have
No.
jurisdiction over them.
No, if you.
So it'd
if
just be
you're-
your sewage system.
Right, if you're annexed into let's say your property was annexed into the city and you're on well and septic, you are not required to connect to well, or city sewer and water. If you're in the city limits and you're on those systems and they fail, then and we have those services available to you, then you would be required to connect to those services. If they fail and we don't have those services there for you, then you go back to health department and.
Start over again.
Yep.
And service would not be considered to be available at this time, would it?
It would.
For that, it depends. I mean,
Which parts are we talking
if they're right here.
Oh.
If this comes
We
through
love
and
our
develops,
system. Yeah.
if it,
No, you get-
there'll be
you get a
sewer and
key,
water
so-
right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, just a note on that whole discussion for anybody that is looking to annex that wants to develop your properties. Any new needs for it would have to hook up. So if your home
Thanks
is,
for that. We love our system.
yours, but for the majority of the green area, if you've got one home up there that's on septic and well, wonderful. If you want to build 3 more and you're annexed in at that point, then we need to connect to city services, but not that first one, so.
No, the first one you would at that time.
I would have, well,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Other questions, other comments? Bob, your hand has gone up and down and up and down. Okay. Okay. With that, council, any additional questions, concerns, things that you would like Mitch to go after until this comes back to us on the 14th?
July 4th, I think that's what I said, 14?
And you're looking for some direction on,
Well, as Councilman Boger asked for my recommendation is option 2. If you think that I should vary from that, or that I think that's where the discussion will be on the 14th when you take action.
Unless we hear otherwise.
Unless you
Yeah,
hear,
that-
yeah.
We didn't hear from any of the people, the red parcels in option 2 tonight, right?
Mr. Navidi, you did, yes,
Okay.
up in here.
No, that's not part of option 2.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, in option 2, yes, so that's these 2 parcels right
We
here.
did not hear from them tonight.
No, actually, Mrs. Palmeroy, I believe, is right here. She showed up this morning and said she would not be here this evening, but I told her I had her marked as a no anyway, but.
Okay. What about the red parcel on the,
That'd be me right here. I'm sort of a blue at this point, so change the color.
Which, would you point to it to make sure we're on the same
Right there.
page?
That one, okay.
okay. All right.
Joyce, Connie Jo?
Could you update that and send it to us, the changes as they come through, the
Yep.
colors?
What you have, if anything changes on this, I will absolutely forward it to you. I don't, except for the blue, I guess.
That one?
Yeah.
And then the couple that's here,
Oh, they were red. Yeah, they were over
they
here.
want to go red,
Yes.
Right.
And we're not even considering that.
and we had a
That-
red.
That's not part of my recommendation
They're
right
not
now.
part
And
of it.
we don't have numbers to sustain it, so.
Yeah, if we tried to bring them in, they skew that.
And he's saying he wants to go blue with no response?
No, I'm just wait and see attitude.
I-
I'm
yeah.
not sure. I understand
Undecided.
that my vote really wouldn't mean much, like the 60%.
Okay.
So
Well,
I get that.
I wouldn't say that necessarily, because I'm very reluctant to bring anyone in who doesn't want in. If they are kind of, if you go either way on it, I'm not so reluctant.
And the folks that are no response, are you going to pursue them still? Oh, you are?
Some are.
You just arrived. There's a person, I see legs. There's a person there. Do you want to speak?
Is this you?
yes.
Come tell us your,
Spoke to your folks.
tell us your stance.
Since I missed most of the meeting,
Hi, Michelle.
Oh. So I am half of the Russells in the blue, and I'm opposed. But, you know, the husband and wife always on the same page.
Oh, you're a house divided.
No, I don't think so. We're both no's, aren't we, honey?
Can you give me a hint?
We're both no's.
Can you give me a
Yes,
hint
we're
as to
no's.
why?
I have no desire to be in the city limits. We like it just the way it is. I know we cannot stop progress, but I would like it to be slowed considerably.
Has this
Thanks,
always
Michelle.
been the Washougal growth, what's it called?
Urban growth
Urban
boundary?
growth,
Boundary.
urban growth.
This is actually our.
For how long?
This is the latest one that the county gave us 7 years ago.
05, 06, 07.
And you were already there or planning to build at the time? You were already there?
We were there for 5 years before and would never, honestly, would never have bought the property had we'd known that. No desire to be, nothing against Washington, no desire to be.
Understood. Thanks, Michelle. Now, one note on their properties as well, and Mr. Doyle's to the end, the red one, the one that's currently red, that is a one-way, or not a one-way, but a dead-end street as well, that only has access off of Crown Road to get to them. There are no roads to the other properties up there to come in any other direction.
Are the roads now maintained by the county?
Those are private.
Private drives, are they not?
They're
Yeah.
private drives, okay.
developer wants to make it public.
Okay.
And the developer would be required to make his portion a public road to a city standard.
Even if it ended up being on the green section and not even touching any of those other streets, or the other lots, he may have to do an entire street all by himself.
Okay.
Or themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
So numbers are changing.
So, for the public, this comes back to us on July 14th. I would certainly encourage anyone and everyone to be here again to see how the discussions go. For some of you that, in this case, if we stay towards the option 2 in discussions, if you're outside of those areas, very likely there isn't going to be much of any discussion about you being included in this annexation process itself, just because the numbers don't work and we legally wouldn't be able to do it anyway, so. But I wouldn't discourage you from not being here on the 14th, because you never know where discussions go.
Would it be at 5 o'clock?
Most likely it'll be at the council meeting itself at 7 o'clock.
Actions required.
And there'll be another time in there again where we'll take comments as part of the discussion on the item itself, not way ahead of time or way afterwards, so. Okay. Thank you, Mitch. Mrs. Forsberg, are you ready?
I'll wait for the mask.
Don't worry. Good to see you, Bob.
Yeah. Oh, this chair's much cushier. Yeah.
I'll trade you seats. Or I'll leave.
You'll leave?
Let's talk about some long-term financial projections and budget strategies.
All right. It is that time of year where we start talking about the 2015 budget. So the mayor wanted to have a discussion to bring out our plan and where we expect to go this coming year for the budget process. So tonight we'll be talking about the 2015 preliminary budget information, discuss the levy lid lift renewal, a transportation benefit district, and then we'll conclude with next steps. So some of the drivers for the 2015 budget discussion, we're planning to implement the $360,000 for streets, which got us to, I believe, the 78% number for our road maintenance plan, which is an additional $210,000 over what we're currently using in that program. We're going to have continued focus on cost containment to address the projected deficits. We are going to zero-base travel and training and professional services to the department heads. That doesn't mean we're not going to have that in the budget. It just means that department heads will have to bring forward detailed plans as to what they're going to provide for travel and training and what professional services are needed. Dave wanted me to make sure to point out that that could be savings and that could be, holy cow, we aren't spending enough on the professional services side and the training side. So just a note that it may not save money, but it will give us a clearer picture as to what we do need to provide for travel, training, and professional services.
And that will come forward during the budget process as the department heads finish their actual individual department budgets.
Because they know their schedule, they know when they have mandatory trainings and so forth.
The annual meetings to attend and then the training necessary for staff.
Good, thank you.
And then we are assuming the 1% increase in the property tax levy. So if you'll recall, back at the annual retreat, this is what we were looking at for the future for 2015. You can see I don't have the nifty pointer like Mitch, but you can see the estimated for 2015, we were looking at a deficit of approximately $570,000. So what I've been doing is looking at some of those revenue drivers. You can see the forecast at 2.7% revenue growth versus a 4.2% increase in expense growth. This is high level, very preliminary, could change, but based on what I've been seeing in trends and where things came in 13 and some projections moving forward, those revenue and expenditure projections have changed slightly. So for 15, it looks like revenues could be increasing more at like a 3% rate, and expense growth has dropped a little bit to 4.17. This does make some assumptions. We are providing additional options for employee medical benefits and those types of things. So it assumes that everybody stays where they're currently at with the medical choices, and that they'll increase at 8%. It also takes into account any contracts that we have that are finalized, the COLAs and all those types of things. Again, the 1% increase in property tax and 1.5% of new construction, which we should be able to reach this year. It also assumes that we're going to use the remaining fund balance in the EMS fund that we have had from the prior levy lid lift. There's a remaining balance of approximately $377,000. So that's how we got the estimated number from 570 in the red to 322,000 in the red. So we wanted to provide you this good, but still in the negative bracket information, but it is less in the brackets. So tonight we wanted to talk about the mayor's proposal for addressing the deficit of $322,000. It combines expense and revenue options. On the expense side, we have some administrative efficiencies that we'll talk about here in a moment, and then some revenue side options as well regarding renewing the levy lid lift and then discussing the TBD license tax fee, or license tab fee, excuse me. D, not an X. So we have been discussing this at City Hall. We have a couple of vacancies, as you know. One position didn't come back after having a baby, which is awesome that she'll get to stay home with the baby. And then we've had difficulty in finance filling that second accountant position. So Mitch and I have worked together, and we're going to maintain the current setup with, which doesn't include an administrative assistant in community development, and does not include a second accountant, but it does restructure things, provide cross-training, and will save the city approximately $73,000. So we're excited for that. We have
Well done.
a receptionist type position posted currently internally. If we don't have any applicants, we will go external and fill that position, and then start with the cross-training of staff. So we're very excited for that opportunity, and we think it'll work well, all while saving the city money.
And you had meetings with both the Public Works staff and Community Development staff and your finance staff.
We haven't touched base with Public Works, but Community Development and Finance.
Union heads, I guess I should say.
Yes, and the union has been talked to or brought into this discussion as well. The union president didn't have any issues with it at all. and staff on both sides were very excited for the opportunity.
What job did you say is posted?
It's like a receptionist, but Pam, the gal at the
The
front
girl at
desk,
the
so they'll answer
Tim?
the phones, do receipting, they'll do backup on other things, mail, those types of things. Whereas-
Already on the website?
Correct. No, I'm sorry, it's internal.
Internal,
We
that's
have
right.
to post it internal for 10 days, and then there's currently nobody, other than the 2 staff in my department, that are already that position. There's no other equivalent position at the city at that range, so it would be, there's nobody that would just jump straight across into that position, so I'm not sure if we'll have interest in it or not.
So everybody else is already higher than that.
Correct.
Gee, I wanted the motion unless.
Gotcha.
So, we'll see though, you never know. If not, I know that our current temp who lives in Washougal loves the job
Can I
and
ask
would definitely most likely apply.
Okay.
That's that part.
Good.
That brings us to the revenue side proposals. We're going to discuss renewing the levy lid lift and then the TBD vehicle tab. Just some background again on the levy lid lift. This is probably a refresher for most of you because it was in a presentation last year. So the regular levy lid lift is governed by RCW 8455050. It requires a majority of the voters to increase the levy rate up to the statutory max, which is 310. And as you'll recall, in the past, we've been at the 310 and weren't able to renew it. Prior to last year, I think was the first opportunity we had, being collection in 14. So we could have put it on the ballot in 13, but chose not to. And our cap is actually, you'll see on the next slide, is actually gotten a little bit bigger. So we are moving in the right direction. We're getting a lower rate, more AV, and yay, things are moving. It can be used for any purpose, but we would definitely market it as the renewal for EMS and fire services. The community's been very supportive of paying for those services, so we are assuming they would be continue to be supportive of that. These are the updated numbers. As you'll recall, I mentioned, I believe, at the last time I was here, that we were getting new numbers from the assessor. I think on the first quarter update, we brought those forward. So this is the new number for the estimated preliminary. Let me say that 15 times. Preliminary could change. Number for 15.
Say that 15 times.
I know.
It's all right.
I had to make some assumptions, so we'll see what happens. But they were pretty spot on last time they gave us preliminary numbers. The assessor and his staff have been doing a great job communicating early the past year and a half. So that's awesome.
Jen, on the 2015 numbers, does that include the state numbers, or have you?
It does. I estimated averaged the state numbers because they don't get the state numbers for a while, so that's kind of where the qualifier comes in. Basically, I took the numbers from the prior 3 years, divided them by 3, and put them in there. So that's kind of what we did last year too with Willie at the assessor's office. So it came out almost spot on. So hopefully it'll be at least that number, if not higher. But again, it is an estimate. When you do the magic of figuring out your rate, it takes us down to, I rounded it, 2.636 rate. So versus 2.87, I believe, last year.
Doesn't, the library cuts into us on this, don't they?
We already subtracted that out. That was the
Theirs is
50.
over and above that. There's just
Okay.
50 cents.
Mhm. That's what capped us at the 310 versus the 360.
Okay, thank you.
So why did it go down again? Explain.
Because we've got more valuation.
Because
Spread over more
we
value.
can only increase 1% over the prior year's dollar amount levy, regardless of what AV does. So if that goes up, our rate comes down because you spread that across a greater value.
So potentially we could do up to 46 cents, but we're only proposing 10 cents.
Correct.
Excuse me, and perhaps this isn't the proper time, but it seems to me if we can catch this deficit while we're here, before it gets into the million plus, and set in programs that are ongoing that will keep cutting that we don't have to be going into debt year after year, or close that margin of what's happening to us. Is that? the efficiencies you're talking about in the office sound to me like those can be permanent efficiencies that will help carry this out.
Correct, and that's why I updated the slide with the smaller deficit number, because that does carry forward.
Yes, so, okay,
So-
but does the levy lid lift help that future?
Correct,
Yes.
and that is not factored into that slide. That is,
Okay.
I have not factored in any revenue options into those future projected slides.
Okay, because that's a big concern, because it just keeps growing.
Correct.
And the 10-cent levy lid lift, it's another thing you should say 5 times really fast.
Yeah.
The 10 cents, that's just tradition, that we'd stop at 10 when we're entitled to 46.4.
4, wasn't it?
No, it was 10 cents before.
Sorry, Brent,
Mhm.
what'd you say?
We actually got more than 10 cents off of it, and I think our conventional thinking right now is if you allow us to put it on the ballot, it passes, that most likely in 15 and most likely in 16, it will generate more than 10 cents as well,
Okay.
which is what generated all that additional money that went into the Fund 125.
And that's
Restricted
enough to
fund.
bring us up to the point of this deficit?
No, not
Well,
unto itself.
The
It only
community
generates
supported the 10
144.
cents. Council, was in favor of the 10 cents. We kind of went with it. If
Start
it's
with
not
10.
broke, don't fix
Yeah, if you
it.
remember when we first started the discussions of the levy lid lift, we had some numbers going up to 21 cents.
All right.
Paul?
Connie Joe and I were in a seminar, kind of the last one of Friday, with Mike Bailey,
Oh.
who is the finance director of Redmond, but has been a finance director essentially since 1984, I think it is. And he had a graph, now he was talking about capital facilities plans in particular, but he had a graph in which the projected expenses did this and the projected revenue did this.
Same graph
Over-
we have.
Said pretty much like we have. And I looked at that and it occurred to me, I said, when you first started, if you had drawn that graph then, what would it have looked like? And he said, pretty much the same. And I said, 10 years ago, what would that graph have looked like? And he said, pretty much the same. So
Like a cat chasing its tail, isn't it?
the point is, yes, we need to pay attention to this, but it's also true that every year when you draw that graph, it's always going to look like that.
That seems depressing.
To some degree, think of it as how we do business.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons that I've settled on these recommendations coming forward to you on council. It's not more than we need for the next year, and it still leaves options for the out years as well to continue to move those a little bit and do everything else. It still keeps healthy reserves by the time we're done in all of our reserve accounts. But when it comes down to how much we're actually asking our ratepayers to send to City Hall, it's keeping it as small as possible and still covering the deficits.
Okay. Makes sense. When you say that, it makes sense.
So just for perspective, again, in historical value, the lid lift history, well, we went out for it in '06 and they approved it for 6 years. And just the stats behind that and what it brought in to the city in that 6-year time frame. The cost to the average house and what it would generate approximately $144,000 to the city. And again, it'd be identified for fire and emergency medical services. And we have, I've been told that the average median house is now $275,000. So that was the cost that we put on, and that would cost them $2,750 annually.
It's really important to put that figure in that, you probably always have, haven't you? On the ballot conversation, because who can't afford $2,750 annually if they have a $275 house? So, I mean, you talk about percentages and you talk about taxes, but then when you see that, yeah, it's good, thank you.
So that's all I have on the levy lid lift renewal. And I think we've had discussions in the past that we had support to bring that forward, so we I'm jumping the gun, never mind. We'll go on to vehicle license tab fee, and then we'll get to the conclusion at the end. So just a refresher, I know that Trevor gave a presentation on the TBD, Transportation Benefit District, and license tab fee. Our current count, that's the most current that we have, is from November of 13, and there are 10,731 licensed vehicles within city limits, with a $20 fee, which is the highest you can go councilmatically, would generate $215,000 a year. The mayor's proposal would be to do a phase-in approach, where we would enact $10 per vehicle for 2015 to get a revenue projection of $107,000, and then up that to $20 in 2016 to bring in the $215 for 2016, and moving forward. And just the side note again, that once you create it and initiate the fee, it takes Department of Licensing 6 months before they will start collecting it, and then it's the first full month after that 6-month time frame.
How much do they charge us to collect it?
I don't know if that,
I told zero.
I haven't found a fee yet. It could be included in that agent fee, but
And then the other is, out of that 10,000 vehicles, do we have any idea how many of them are trailers or?
These ones are actually passenger vehicles, correct?
I would assume they're passenger vehicles. They have a transportation benefit coordinator, and so that's who I've been in contact with on which numbers to apply to the analysis.
For me, I'd like to exclude trailers, but certainly include any motorized commercial vehicles.
The state has set the program, and there are exclusions.
We'll get
Okay.
that, we'll get that.
But I
next
don't
to you.
think that we can change the exclusions. I think it's
Okay.
a set program that we have to follow.
But it takes
Okay.
into campers, RVs.
Right.
Farm equipment.
So a camper that goes
ATVs.
on the truck, I think is exempt, but an RV isn't exempt, I think is what we saw on that list the other day.
Yeah, because it has wheels that move it.
Right.
Uh,
And then it's certain, like 2,000 gross weight, I think for the trailer, and under is exempt, but over is not exempt.
What about motorcycles?
They would not be exempt.
If they're licensed for the road.
So they're
Dirt-
full.
Dirt
full
bikes,
engine.
ATVs and all those types of things are
Like I have
exempt,
a 4
the off-road.
49.5 cc's scooter. So I'm just, something like that.
It has to be licensed, I believe.
It's licensed.
All on there. And then we would start a program as well to make sure and reach out to all of those. And it specifically spells it out, American veterans, American disabled,
That have the,
disabled American veterans that are properly
have the
papered
plate.
with the, yeah, that are properly
You mean
papered with
American
the-
citizens?
No, veterans.
They have a program through Department of Licensing that disabled veterans that are a certain percent disabled, I believe, get all their fees waived on their license plates. But you have to be
You
a
were
certain.
emphasizing veterans
Disabled American veterans,
versus,
disabled foreign veterans.
Like if there's someone who's in the
So if-
Canadian Army?
I'm assuming
Like-
so.
like
They literally,
somebody
they
from
literally spell it
China?
out, so.
So if
that
they're.
drives a
Amer-
car.
My understanding, Connie
Okay.
Jo, is that if they're Americans who fought in the Canadian Army in World War II, they do not
Wouldn't
qualify.
qualify.
Okay, they had to fight with the American Army, military. Got it?
It's
Not
history-
citizens either.
History lesson as well.
Wow.
So that takes our projected deficit for 2015 to zero, with the administrative efficiencies of 73,000, renewing the levy lid lift at 144, and then the $10 vehicle tab fee at 107,000. So the next steps and questions, just to have the determination from council. I believe we'll have a draft resolution to put it on the November ballot for the 10-cent levy lid lift at the next workshop for adoption by the 28th to ensure that we hit the election timeframe.
Can you double check that with Dawn's office, that they'll have it ready to go by then?
Yeah.
For the 14th, for the
Yeah.
workshop on the 14th.
I was going to correct it, but yeah.
And could you email me at least a link to the qualification list from DOL?
Yes. I have it, handy. MRSC has a lot of good information on it as well, I believe.
Thank you, thank you.
That links directly to their website too, so.
Let's go ahead and send that to all council.
So
I
it
will.
cleans up the deficit all the way through 2015.
15.
And then it'll decrease, you know,
And
when you
it
add
moves
in the
the out years
revenue,
by those amounts as
it'll
well.
decrease the future years as well.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
It'll also improve all of the out years by that same amount as
Sure.
well, so it begins to come down.
'Cause
Our,
they're
one of our
ongoing.
assumptions in there, and again, as Jennifer goes through these, there's a whole lot of assumptions in the budget, no matter what. One of the assumptions, though, is a year from now, as we're starting to work on the 2016 deficit, that not only will you potentially have these in place, you've got some additional things that you can do, and hopefully continued recovery of the economy and property values and everything at the same time as well, which continues to bring us a little bit more. So all in all, it just hopefully whittles its way down from a lot of different areas. So.
That's,
And the levy lid lift is only 6 years,
Correct.
Correct.
Same as our
so you
levy.
have to look at it.
that's one of the neat things about levy lid lifts, is that they're actually a rate, where, as opposed to a levy. A levy is an amount. So we can increase our levy amount by 1%. But if all of the property values went up 10%, then our rate would actually go down.
Continues to go down.
On the other hand, if we take 10 cents per thousand, if everything goes up 10%, then that amount goes up 10%. So it's levy lid lifts, especially for things like EMS, where you have costs that tend to track inflation more than property values, or property values, really. Lid lifts are very attractive for that reason.
And then the last bullet is to get direction from council on the TBD, Transportation Benefit District and Vehicle License tab.
We're at 6:30. Do you want to have that discussion now, or do you want to take it into council meeting and?
Well, I already know where I am.
I know where I am, I'm for it. I support it. I would support it for $20, so $10 is easy.
I will support the levy lid lift, I will not support the tab. Unless it's put on the ballot,
You will not support what?
the tab.
And when do we have to make this decision?
There's no deadline, it's just keep in mind that
With the
should you
6-month lag.
choose to go that way, it will lag 6 months from the time you do that. So if it
Don't-
happens in August or September, it just goes farther into the
But we
year.
don't have a date set that we have to
If you want to put it,
choose.
if there is consensus of the council at some point that you want to put it on the ballot, then yes, you have a date certain of July 28th that it needs to be passed.
It is a survey question, correct?
It is.
And we'll have the results, I believe, on the 14th, the
So
survey results. I think that's when we're
would
presenting.
that,
I'd have to,
Is it a survey question?
Yes.
What was your answer?
I'd have to look at the survey, how many responses there are, put it in for the, what do you call it, the margin of error and that sort of thing, before I take that into account.
Okay.
I don't have an answer yet.
Okay.
I'd like to see what the folks say. The folks.
I've had several discussions with various citizens around town, and I haven't seen too much negative about it. So what I'm feeling is they want the town kept up. That seems to be the priority. Get our streets, it's going to that, get our town, keep it fixed up, so that,
Then why not have a vote if we think that's what the response would be?
what's that?
Why not have a vote on it if we think that's what the response would be?
Well, yeah, I don't know, I mean, mine's all anecdotal, of course, but I know there is a question on the survey.
I'll look at the survey, but at this point, I'm leaning against it.
Thank you.
Martha, anything you'd like to comment on?
Yes, regarding your lift, we
Yes.
are also, our EMS expires this year, and we are going to be on the ballot in November for our renewal of our EMS services. It looks like the board is leaning, we haven't voted yet, but we're leaning towards maintaining the current level and not increasing it. We're gonna be, Camus is bringing a presentation to us, Kathy Huber-Nickerson, to talk to us about the two projections with the 46 cents versus 35, clear out to 2018. Camus says there's no pressure, they're not concerned either way. So it's very timely that you're also doing yours at the same time. I think it's a good way for us to support each other in getting that through. We want our EMS services, they're vital. We know that, and we appreciate you. Is that a supermajority or not? It's not, it's simple majority for Lift, isn't it? That's what I thought, yeah, so that's, so sorry.
Now.
If we stay the same, it's a simple majority versus.
Used to be.
Change it, yeah, right now, that makes it better. Appreciate that, thank you.
Thanks, Martha. Okay, we're adjourned, we're adjourned here, and we'll be back here at 7 o'clock for regular council.
Thank you.